I'll start my video. Here we go.
Hello, Barbara.
Hello, here we are.
Hey. Good to see you.
Thank you, nice to be here.
Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in just a moment. Thank you for coming to our live director talk with Brad Rothschild, who is joining us from New York. And we're so excited to have you here. I'm just logistically, we're setting up and just want to wait a couple more minutes or maybe just 30 seconds to make sure that everybody's in. Here we go. So joining us tonight, before we get started, is Ellen Bluestein, who is the Executive Director of JCC Sonoma County. Hello, Ellen. I'm going to unmute Ellen. Ellen needs to unmute herself. There you go. Hello, Ellen.
Good evening, Irena. Good evening, Brad, who's our speaker. And I want to thank all of you for supporting the Jewish Film Festival and joining us this evening for the very significant film on a very important topic. So diversity among our community and helping people who don't have as much as we do. So thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. And Ellen is our intrepid leader here at the JCC and really is just an incredible leader here with our Jewish community. So thank you, Ellen. And thank you all of us for joining us and for supporting the Jewish Film Festival. My name is Irene Hodes, as many of you know, and I'm the director of what has turned into the virtual Jewish Film Festival this year. We persevered, and until we can be back in the movie theater together, really appreciate your support and hope that you're enjoying all of the film programs that we have this year. And just to remind all of you, you have one more week left to view the 10 films and the 7 film programs that we have available. I would like right now to introduce Brad. Brad Rothschild is the director of They Ain't Ready for Me, the film that we are featuring, this incredible documentary feature at the Virtual Jewish Film Festival 2020 this year. Brad has a really amazing background. Just a little bit about him before we start with the questions. I'm going to talk a little bit about him and I'll ask some questions, and the format will be that you can begin to type your questions at any time into the chat. So at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see a little icon that says chat, and that'll pop up and you can type your question in there. And I and Sonia, my colleague here also, who is now waving, will be helping out and administering that and sending your questions over to Brad. So Brad is a director and a producer, and he is joining us from New York today. Thank you for staying up late. And he has won many awards as a producer and a writer. He has a business background actually, and has been educated at Columbia University, and has a background as a speechwriter for the Mission of Israel to the United Nations. Brad produced the award-winning documentary feature Kinderblock 66, Return to Buchenwald. He's also directed the documentary film African Exodus about the plight of Israel's African refugees, and the documentary film Tree Man. He has several projects in the works, I believe, right now, and we'd love to ask him about that, and do feel free to do so. So welcome, Brad, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Happy to be with all of you today.
Wonderful. Well, congrats on the success of the film. I know that it is making the rounds at so many different Jewish film festivals and film festivals in general, and has been getting incredible press, and rightly so. It is a very powerful film, and we are so incredibly honored, and I know that everybody here has probably very much enjoyed and learned a lot from watching it. Can you tell us about how you met Tamar? If you could give us the origin story of how this documentary came to be.
Sure. So it was October of 2016. I was reading an article in the Jewish Telegraphic Agency, the JTA. I was reading the JTA online, and there was an article. The headline was Black Rabbinical Student Leads Army of Moms Against Gun Violence in Chicago. So I saw that and I was a bit intrigued, to say the least. And I scrolled down and I saw a picture of this striking woman named Tamar Manasseh. And I read the article that talked about how she created this organization called MASK, Mothers and Men Against Senseless Killing, and that she was sitting out on the same street corner every day in Chicago taking on gun violence on the South Side. But what really grabbed me was the part of the article where Tamar said that it was she credited her Judaism for her activism. So it's because she's Jewish that she decided she had to do something to take on this problem. So I was really intrigued when I read this, and I decided that I wanted to reach out to her to see if she'd be interested in working on a film. So with social media being what it is and technology, I reached out to her a few different ways, including via her organization's website. I sent an email and I introduced myself as a filmmaker from New York City. And I told her that I thought that her story would make a great documentary film. So she didn't respond immediately. It took a few tries. And finally, I got a response from her. I got a note saying, "Thank you for your interest. I think my life is about as interesting as watching the paint dry, so I'm going to pass." And I wrote back and I said, "With all due respect, I disagree, and I hope that you'll reconsider." And we started a correspondence, and she wouldn't always reply to me, but she replied just enough that I knew that I shouldn't give up. And we spoke on the phone a couple of times, and each time I thought to myself that she's more incredible than I had originally thought. And then I got a message from her, a Facebook message, and she said, "I'm in Staten Island. If you want to meet me, I can meet you right now." So for those of you who don't know New York geography, I live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Staten Island is technically a part of New York City, but it is nowhere near where I live. So I wrote her back and I said, "Give me 2 hours and I'll be there." And I dropped what I was doing and I drove out to Staten Island, and we sat down for a while and we had a really good conversation. And at the end, she looked at me and she kind of shrugged her shoulders and she said, I guess if you want to make this film, we can do it this summer." And that was it. That was all I needed.
Wow. It's an interesting origin story that somebody who was so interesting just shows you how humble a
Yeah.
person is when she says that her life is as interesting as watching paint dry,
Yes,
which is
very modest.
far from the truth as it could be.
I'm glad that she relented finally.
Yeah. And a little bit about, before we delve into the world of the film, I have not seen your other films, but I've been reading about them. And it's interesting to me to see what the pattern has been. How do you choose your film projects? Because I feel like there's a little bit of a pattern. I don't know if there's a morality play there or a specific Jewish interest, but if you could talk a little bit about the connection between what you choose.
So there's definitely a Jewish interest there. I mean, without question. I think, the trite answer is, I don't choose my projects choose me. Well, like with this hit me. I mean, I read this and I knew that I had to make this film. So some of my other films, for example, Kinder Block 66, which is about, we followed 4 men who had been liberated from Buchenwald when they were teenagers and younger. We went back with them for the 65th anniversary of their liberation. And that film, the executive producer is a good friend of mine. And when he told me about what he wanted to do, I just said, "Sign me up. Whatever you want, I'm in." Because, and this is going back more than 10 years now. At the time, I realized how important it was to document Holocaust survivor stories, because I was looking forward to 10 years from then, which is about now, that there wouldn't be a lot of people left to tell these stories. So what I was thinking was, we have this window of opportunity that is rapidly closing. And I was really it was something that was really important to me to help tell the story. So we followed these four boys who are now men, and actually of the four, only two of them are still with us. So it was great that we did it, and it taught me a lot as a filmmaker. It taught me a lot as a Jew. It taught me a lot as a person. And then from there, working on African Exodus, which, as you mentioned, is a film about African asylum seekers in Israel. This was a story that a cousin of mine called me from Israel to tell me that he was involved with an organization that was helping Darfuri refugees in Israel. So again, this is going back to when there was a genocide happening in Darfur. All of a sudden, Darfuris started popping up in Israel, and nobody really knew what to do. So I thought this is an interesting subject for a film, because Israel, as a country founded by Holocaust survivors and refugees from persecution, what an interesting parallel it would be to see how they treat refugees from another genocide. And when I got to Israel, I realized that that story was a lot more complicated than what I had originally thought. As a lot of the Africans were not from Darfur, but were from Darfur among other places, including South Sudan and Eritrea. And at one point, there were about 60,000 Africans in Israel, and it was an overwhelming number when you think about how small the country is. But that film evolved as I was making it, because honestly, when I first started working on it, I thought, well, they'll just take care of this, and the problem, and it'll go away, and there won't even be a need for a film. But as it turned out, I was a little disappointed in how the government of Israel dealt with these people who were seeking refuge. Interestingly, one of the characters in my film is an artist who lives in Tel Aviv, and he saw the plight of the refugees, and it touched him because he was the grandchild of Holocaust survivors from Germany. And what he did was he set up a soup kitchen in a park in South Tel Aviv where a lot of homeless refugees and asylum seekers sleep. So every night he was bringing food to feed people, because that was his way of expressing his Judaism. So in a lot of ways, he's sort of the precursor, in my mind, to Tamar. And actually, when I showed Tamar this movie, she connected immediately with this guy and said, that's me. And so in a lot of ways, she is. Now, the film that you wouldn't think would be anything like this one is Tree Man, which is a film about the people who come to New York City to sell Christmas trees every year. So this is a uniquely New York phenomenon. I'm sure that for all of you living in Northern California, this is kind of a foreign idea, but during the holiday season, New York City is transformed by the arrival of hundreds of people who live on the streets or live in their cars and sell Christmas trees on the corner. And as every few blocks in the city, you'll see another tree stand. So I was working on another project, and my partner on that project was telling me about how they were going to buy their Christmas tree that weekend, and started telling me about the person who they buy the tree from. And I said, wait, hold on a second. And the more he talked about it, I said, this guy, he's a subject of a film. And he was. We actually had the philosopher king of Christmas tree sellers. But what turns out that is similar about what Tamar does is that he created this universe on the corner of 102nd and Broadway, in which he was the center of that universe. And Francois is his name. And he became Christmas for an entire neighborhood. So kids grow up buying their tree from Francois year after year. And he has lots of friends in the neighborhood. He becomes a fixture in the neighborhood for 5 or 6 weeks every year. And then he goes back home to Canada to his wife and kids. So again, it's a little bit like what Tamar does, where she's on the block, she sets up her chair, and she becomes the center of this community of choice. So these are, and to me, there's something very compelling about being outside and having people around you who you care about, who are not necessarily your family, but who become like your family. And that's a lot of what happens on the block. So, I mean, I'm not sure that there are a ton of ties between those two movies, although one of the characters in Tree Man is a Holocaust survivor, so we do have a little bit of a Jewish angle in there too. But that's kind of the films that I've been working on lately.
From what you've described of those three films, they do seem to have a lot of commonality of the creation of community and the ethic around some of that, and what Tamar had seen in the feeding of people. I feel like that is an important thing, that food brings people together, and food is such a survival element that if you are not eating, then nothing else happens. You can't love, you can't live if you are not eating. Is that a big part of her just bringing food every day to feed the community?
There's so many problems in that community. I think the short answer is yes, but it's more than that too, because food is only one of the problems. Food insecurity is a huge problem, but it's also, there are employment problems, education problems, housing problems. The idea, and it's entirely possible that a lot of the behaviors that we witness out there stems from people being hungry. And when you're hungry, you don't necessarily act in a way that a well-fed person behaves. So, they call places, neighborhoods like Englewood on the south side of Chicago, they call them food deserts. But it's not really a food desert, it's a food swamp, because they have food there, but all of the food options are terrible. You have fast food places all over. You have grocery stores selling rancid food. It's really sad, but yeah, I think there's something about delivering healthy food to people, or good food to people, that puts people in a different headspace. But to a little bit less, on a less serious note, it's very interesting. They get a lot of, Tamar and Mask, they get a lot of donations of food, right? And you see it in the film. There's a lot of grilling of hamburgers and hot dogs and things like that. And kids love it, and chips and whatever. There are very well-meaning people who will bring things like tortellini salad to the block. And the kids don't eat tortellini salad. They'll look at that and they'll say, "What is this?" And it's, the first time you see it, you think like, "Oh, that's really funny." People are really trying to do good, and here they're bringing expensive food, and nobody's going to eat it.
I guess it's an issue of your background, of how you were raised. And I suppose there's that sentence very early on in the film, and it just goes through the film, is it takes a village. It takes a village to raise a child. And the endemic problems of violence and food insecurity and poverty and unemployment and drugs, you can really see that the fabric of a society isn't there, the things that bring people together. And you talked about creating a family. They're not related, but she has made this big effort to create a working village again. And that's, I suppose we're talking now very pre-COVID. And so I wanted to, and we do have people asking questions right now, but I did want to ask you to tell us a little bit, because we did talk about this ourselves on Saturday, what has happened since COVID happened, which is almost immediately after the film came out. She's had to, what we call, pivot her entire function. And it's no longer a summer program. She's been immensely important right now during the lockdown. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, so even before the lockdown, so what you see in the film is the transformation, the physical transformation of that block. And since we wrapped shooting, the block has changed even more, because there are now 3 shipping containers that have been retrofitted to classrooms on that block. And she built those before COVID. So it's almost as if she knew that she would need to do more. And the idea when she built it was that they had closed a bunch of public high schools in that neighborhood. And because of the realities there, Tamar understood that closing those schools meant that there would be kids who don't go back to school. Because when your school is not in your neighborhood and you have to cross invisible gang lines to get from your home to your new school, there are kids who just say, I'm not doing this. It's too dangerous. So to combat that, Tamar decided she was going to build these schools and teach kids there. And it was originally to teach older kids. And then COVID hit, and now she's teaching younger kids there. And they have, it's not a school like a charter school or a public school. It's just like an after school program that goes on during the day, because there are kids who need supervision during the day, who need education during the day. You know, one of the many things that COVID has exposed, especially in communities like where Tamar lives, is the education gap. So the big fear is what happens when kids go back to school and they've essentially lost a year and a half of education that they couldn't afford to lose in the first place. So when you live on the North Shore and you go to a private school, you're inconvenienced by COVID, but the resources are there so that your education is not doesn't completely grind to a halt. But the kids in Inglewood and in neighborhoods on the south and west sides of Chicago don't have that luxury. So once again, Tamar is sort of stepping into this breach and trying to, do what she can to make the situation better.
So we can go to some of the questions here that relate to what you were just speaking about, is how Tamar funds her projects. And especially now, I did venture to go to the website, and I will put that link for everybody to see, of, the need of technological donations right now, and how she did this both pre-COVID and post-COVID. How is this working?
So Tamar, if she were on this call, would say that she is the Bernie Sanders of community organizers, and that she gets her funding from people who hear about what she does and want to support her. And she gets a lot of $18 donations or $36 donations or whatever, high denomination you want to think of. And that's, for the most part, how she gets funding. And you said you'll put up the website, which would be great. She could use all the help she can get.
We also have a question about, this almost seems like such a pre-COVID concept about using the extra lawn area for a vegetable garden, but I wanted to expand that into the use of the area in general, because I doubt that she owns it, and how that transformation came about to actually being able to, when you squat there and sit there, what eventually happens, and how the containers could legally be there or not in a vegetable garden, if that ever came about.
Well, she owns half of that lot. I think it's called the Chicago Land Bank granted her half of the lot, and there's the other half is kind of in dispute. So they're not going to get booted, I don't think, but she's trying to acquire other vacant lots in Chicago. Unfortunately, there are a lot of vacant lots in Chicago, and I think you mentioned that you're from Chicago yourself, so you can testify to this. There are, boarded up buildings and empty lots where buildings used to be, and you can get them for relatively little amount of money on the south side of Chicago because a lot of people don't want to live there. So I think her idea is to expand that way.
To actually figure out how to buy these affordable properties.
Again, buy or be granted parcels that she can sort of put more trailers on, or not trailers, but shipping containers.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it was something that wasn't clearly addressed in the film, because I know there was all of this, I don't know if you want to get into it, but like the relationship with the police or the relationship with authorities, about how nobody was really doing anything. So it's like she's always bypassing the system and, spreading the concrete down when nobody knew whether she actually had permission to build anything.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a little bit of a feel of, the Wild West out there. It's just like, we're just going to do it. We're just going to have this block party for Labor Day. And she says it in the film. She didn't have a permit for that block party. But what are they going to do once everything shows up on the south side of Chicago? Like, you're going to tell kids to go home because there's no permit? Some of the shots that we used were from a drone. And, technically, you're not supposed to use a drone in the city. And actually, a cop sort of pulled by while we were filming with the drone and asked, he's like, "Oh, what does he got there? A drone?" We're like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, what kind is it?" That's all they really wanted to know. They weren't going to say put it away. They just were more curious. So, she keeps going until somebody tells her to stop. And so far, nobody has told her to stop.
It's almost as if it's such a disenfranchised area that as long as nothing terribly violent happens, who cares?
Yeah, I mean, are you going to tell the woman who's feeding the kids that she doesn't have a permit to give kids food, so you go home, right? Yeah, so she's trying to make things better, but that doesn't mean that she has a great relationship with the police there. And for some reason, she doesn't get the support that they should be giving her. And she doesn't have a great relationship with the city. And I'm still, 4 years later, trying to understand how or why. She's never met with this mayor, with Lori Lightfoot. And to me, that's mind-boggling, because Lori Lightfoot should be embracing Tamar with both arms and making her an ally instead of keeping her at a distance, which is what she's doing.
There have been some questions about Judaism. And I know that we're not going to go into Tamar's identity, because she herself, just says denominationally she is Jewish.
Yeah.
But how is the community potentially responding, or do they at all, to her identity as a Jew? And I know that one of the most interesting things is all the holidays that she celebrates, that so many people don't know. But how is that sort of breached? Is it not talked about at all, or how does that happen?
I think at first people were curious about her Judaism in the neighborhood, because you don't see a lot of Black Jews. But we showed the Sukkot and Passover. People are really into the holidays there. Like, there's so much joy around what she does. People want to be a part of it, and they're curious about it. There is a girl who's probably around 10 years old now, who she told her teacher when she was about 7 that she was Jewish. And the teacher said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "Well, Tamar is Jewish, and Jews do good things, and I'm Jewish too." So, as I have seen it on the block, there is no better PR for Judaism on the south side of Chicago than Tamar, because people really associate Judaism with doing good things for others. And I mean, I don't think we could ask for anything more than that. If you ask Tamar, she would say that the only people in the neighborhood who give her a hard time about her Judaism are some of the clergy, the Christian clergy. But the average person on the street, they knew nothing about Judaism before, and what they know about it now is compelling to them. And of course, because of the many Jews who volunteer in Mask and whose synagogues come down to the corner, they are exposed to more and more Jewish people. And again, these are positive encounters that people have, which is only a good thing.
And you had mentioned, we do want this film to succeed and go out to all sorts of Jewish communities and help in the projects that she's doing. I also found it to be a little bit odd, because it stuck out to me like a sore thumb, that there are these predominantly affluent white Jewish groups coming down to it felt like almost like a sermon that she was giving, or a tour to tourists on the south side of Chicago. Yeah. I know that amongst Chicago congregations, there is some knowledge of her project and of what she does. Yeah. But I don't know if you wanted to talk about that, about, the need for Jewish knowledge, understanding, assistance, and just how that very affluent white presence, and coming to view that is portrayed there or seen there, or what her beliefs are or her opinion is.
You know, she obviously welcomes the help that she gets and the support that she gets from, you know, any community. I think that for people who come to the block once and think like, okay, I did my good deed, it's not enough. And like you said, it shouldn't be just like, oh, I'm going on this tour of the south side of Chicago and I'm going to feed some children and I'm going to feel good about myself. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that's just, it's the beginning. It shouldn't be like, okay, I'm going to do this once a year and I'm going to feel good about myself because this is what I do. It's the opening to something that could potentially be a lot bigger and a lot more enriching, just for your own inner life. That you, instead of going in and sort of, you know, keep, you know, going in like a stranger and, you know, doing like a volunteer project for a day, as opposed to getting to know people as human beings and going back and developing real friendships. I mean, when I go back to the block now, after having spent a lot of time there, like I feel great. I feel happy to see people, and I feel completely comfortable, and I miss it when I'm not there. And then when I'm there, I remember how much I miss not being there. And I think that that's something that everybody could have.
And we do have some questions here about who the youth group specifically, and I think that was one of the suburban, I don't know who they were, the youth group that was there, and a
Yeah.
little bit of question about her synagogue. And I think one of the first questions we got was she ever ordained? And what's going on with her personally, her synagogue, the youth groups that come, and is she ordained?
Okay, so the ordination was supposed to happen in December. So there's a date, and up until last week, like this was solid and it was happening. But because of COVID, Chicago is about to get hit with another closed down, with another, it's going to be shut down. So Tamara doesn't want to do a virtual ordination. She wants it to be in person, and she deserves to have it in person. So they're going to delay this until they have a better understanding of what the conditions are in the city. But it's going to happen. Her rabbi has told her it's going to happen. Like I said, the plans were there for it to happen, and now it will happen. And in terms of the youth groups that were there, there was a synagogue that came down from Skokie Valley that we filmed. And then there was another group of the student group. I think they were from all over the country. I don't think they were from Chicago specifically. It was, I can't remember the name of the organization, but maybe it was the Jewish Council for Urban Affairs, had a summer program, and they stopped by the block the day that we happened to be there filming. And in terms of Tamar's own congregation, Tamar doesn't go to that congregation anymore. Her congregation is on 75th and Stewart.
Okay, so she's no longer going to the congregation that.
I mean, she doesn't, you know, it's like that's the synagogue that I belong to rather than that's the synagogue that I go to.
There was this wonderful quotation that I read somewhere about how her pulpit is on the corner, like she's actually doing her ministry, her service, her Jewish practice by being there on that corner.
And that was something that I wanted to convey in the film, because at the time, you know, as you saw in the film, she hadn't been ordained and they had delayed the vote because she's a woman, and there was no real explanation for why they delayed the vote. But everything that I witnessed of her on that corner, she's a rabbi. What she does is she's a rabbi. So I wanted to convey that in the film, because whether she has the title or not, she's doing the work. And the work is what's important, as she would tell you.
We have some questions here about whether she collaborates or meets with like-minded groups of other community groups, and also about an artist named Theaster Gates who works in Chicago to transform neighborhoods. Do you know if she works with this person or with other Chicago organizations or has relationships that help each other?
I don't know this artist specifically, but she does work with other organizations, depending on the project and depending on what else is happening. But I couldn't speak specifically to what organizations in Chicago she's working with right now.
I have a fun fact here, I think, from the comments that her rabbi is Michelle Obama's cousin.
That is a true fact. That's right. Capers Fournier is a cousin of Michelle Obama's.
Wow. Okay. There are Jews everywhere, it seems.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could tell us about future plans or if that has entirely come to a halt with COVID, or if you have any semblance as to larger trends or projects that Tamara is going to be working on.
Yeah. So she would tell you that her plan is for world domination. And I don't think that COVID is going to impact that too much. She's, in addition to what she's doing with the school, she has started also because of COVID, she started something called Study Buddies, where people can sign up to be tutors online to help kids in the neighborhood who need extra educational support because maybe they come from families where the parents don't have the resources to help them, don't have the ability to help them. You can sign up for that via Tamara's organization's website, which is www.ontheblock.org. In addition to that, she is expanding Mask to other cities. As we speak, she is in Memphis, Tennessee, where she is going to be giving away Thanksgiving dinners this week. And then she's going to Mississippi to do the same thing. And then back to Chicago early next week to do another Thanksgiving dinner and giveaway.
Wow.
So that is the beginning of her. She's really trying to spread her organization's strength to other parts of the country.
Mm-hmm. Now, in the film, I know we've gotten some comments here, some questions about her being a mother. I don't think we really get to know her children very much during the film. I don't know if there's a reason for that, or could you tell us a little bit about her kids or her relationship with how that became part of her mission?
So she would tell you that everything that she does on that block is because she is a mother. And she is a mother who could not bear the thought of having to bury her own children because of gun violence. And she started Mask because one of her daughter's friends got killed, got shot. And it was, for her, it was just one too many. And she knew that if she didn't do something, that eventually she would become one of those mothers who mourns her children. And she can't handle that. She couldn't handle that. So her kids are in their early 20s. And you see Max in the film. You don't hear from Max in the film. And that is because we had an agreement very early on that Max did not want to be interviewed. I've spent a lot of time with the family. And I have to say that after my second trip to Chicago, Tamar told me that when I come back, I had to stay with them in their basement on their couch, which is what I did. So I spent a lot of time with the family and I got to know all of them. And hello?
You are with us.
Yeah, okay, sorry. So when Max early on said he wasn't interested, I said, okay, that's fine. You don't need to talk to me. And I thought, okay, let's see how this will play out. Maybe he'll get comfortable enough with me. And he and I have a good relationship. We both like baseball a lot and professional wrestling. So we bonded over that, but he's just a very private, introverted kid. And he did not want to be interviewed. and I respect that. And he said we could film him on the block because he's doing work to help people, and there's nothing, you know, he has nothing to hide, but he just doesn't, he's not a very, like I said, he's an introvert, but a really sweet young man. Her daughter, Avi, you see her a couple of times in the film. She's never identified. She really wasn't around as much when we were filming. And just, you know, she's active. She's actually more active on the block now with the school than she had been before. So if we made this film today, she would probably be a bigger character, but she wasn't really around when we were filming. So you don't see her as much. But Tamar lives with her kids and her mother. It's a, you know, multi-generational house. They're all very close. It's, as you can imagine, it's a very lively home, fun. They watch MSNBC all the time, or she does, I should say. The MSNBC is constantly on in the kitchen. And yeah, she really enjoyed being a mom to little kids. And I think that she's sort of rediscovered that when she's on the block.
She's like a mother to so many of the kids out there. Does she maintain relationships with them, with the kids on the block?
Yeah, yeah. So Jermaine, for example, who says Tamar's my sister, my mother, my best friend, like they're tight. And she sees those kids and she's, you know, she has relationships with them. She's important to them and they're important to her.
That's amazing. I think that we are sort of close to the end of a lot of these questions. I did put the link to Tamar's organization on theblock.org in the chat. So you can click on that, and we'll also put that on our website with where the films are. So you'll be able to find that in a few different locations. So it looks like they ask for their donation link as well for financial donation, but there seem to be asking for tablets and telephones and things like that as well. Is that something that can really help?
Well, since the kids who are learning remotely, they don't have iPads, or they don't have tablets. So if you can get a tablet to a kid, it can help with their
Really needing that right now.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting. One of the things, the other, you know, like I said earlier, a lot of things were exposed by COVID. You know, high-speed internet access is also something that is not evenly distributed in communities. So a lot of these kids don't have access to the high-speed internet. It's a big problem.
And the shipping containers are wired for that, I assume. Yeah, well, that's great. Does she have a presence in California?
No, I don't think she does.
Oh, interesting. Do you know if she has sites on that, or is she focusing on just a few cities?
You know, I think if there was a local interest, if people came to her and said, we live in wherever and we would like to start a mask chapter, she would certainly be supportive of it.
Is there like a template that she's been sharing?
No, because every community has its own needs. You know, every community needs something different. And I think the key to what she's trying to do is not for Tamar to sit on corners in every city, but for people to be inspired by Tamar to be the improvement in their own neighborhoods and their own communities. And like she said in the film, even if you just take out a chair and sit on your front porch for an hour, just to show that you're present. I think if people do that, you know, you don't need to be Tamar Manassa to make that kind of change.
And does her organization, is it a nonprofit? Does it have a board of directors? Is it growing? Yes, it does. Okay.
501c3 not-for-profit organization with the board. Yeah.
That's wonderful. It's an amazing project. And is this her full-time mission?
Yeah, this is what she does.
This is what she does all the time.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And she has 2 kids, right?
2 kids.
Yeah. I think we're winding down with some of the questions, and I was wondering if you wanted to tell us a little bit about any projects you're working on. I don't know if they've come to a halt right now during COVID, but what are you up to as a filmmaker?
So a lot of the things that I had planned sort of were put on the back burner because of COVID, but um, I had always, once I started working on this, I saw this as the first of the projects that I would work on with Tamar. So we've been talking about a sequel to They Ain't Ready for Me. We're talking about a few different things that we're going to start once this pandemic gets lifted at least a little bit. Then we're going to hopefully start filming again. So be on the lookout for that.
It seems like she has the capability to have an incredible media presence, that she could, I don't know if I haven't seen a huge social media presence, but I feel like she could be virally video something.
Yeah, that's interesting. She's really active on Facebook. She is sort of like allergic to Twitter and Instagram, but when she goes on Facebook Live, she will, when things touch her, either positively or negatively, more likely negatively, she'll go on Facebook Live and she will just have like anywhere from a 7 to 20-minute rant, for lack of a better word, that is always unbelievably sharp. And as you see from the film, she's on point and she's smart and she has a very unique way of expressing her point of view. And yes, I think that there are other mediums other media where she should have more of an audience, and she will have more of an audience. I mean, maybe it'll be a podcast, maybe it'll be something else, but I think we're trying to look into some other avenues for her.
Well, we certainly wish her a lot of luck. There's one last question about what denomination is she getting ordained at? Do you know what the name of the
Yeah,
organization is?
it's the International Israelite Board of Rabbis.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, we thank you so much for your time, Brad. And you taught us a lot, and we certainly wish Tamar all the success in the world. Your film is really touching, and we hope that you continue and have wonderful projects and collaborations with Tamar.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight.
Yes, and thank you for supporting the Jewish community here in the film festival. And again, we will put that link on our website and probably in our newsletter the next couple of days, so that we can all see how we can help Tamar as well during this time, as it sounds like she's doing incredibly important work on the South Side with the children there, who really do need help with their education during COVID.
Absolutely.
So we'll come to a conclusion, I believe, with the talk. Brad, thank you again. And thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And have a wonderful rest of your week and holiday season coming up. All the best.
Take care.
Take care.